Let's talk about the eclipse. Let's talk about past observations of eclipses. Let's talk about transits. Let's talk about the unluckiest astronomer in history. Let's talk about the next eclipse. And let's talk about a genuine announcement, not the fake announcement I released on April Fool's Day. Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I'm an astrophysicist. I write for Ordinary Times, and this is The Throughput. So as I said in my short videos, for this eclipse, we went up to Erie, Pennsylvania. It was just a 3-hour drive. I had never been to Erie before, and I'd heard, that it wasn't so great a place, but we actually really liked Erie. It's a really pretty part of the country. The people up there were all really nice. Everyone was very enthusiastic about the eclipse. There were t-shirts and decorations and parties and all that sort of thing. I got to see Lake Erie, which was really beautiful. I did not expect that. Growing up in the 70s, Lake Erie was kind of synonymous with pollution and the destruction of the environment because it has these industrial cities around it. It was at a time so polluted, rivers into the lake would actually literally catch fire. But after 40 some odd years of cleanup, thanks to the EPA and various other agencies trying to fix this, it's now a much more palatable lake. It still has a little bit of problems with runoff from farms and stuff like that, creating algae blooms. But you would not be able to tell that this was once a lake that people thought was literally going to die and not be able to host fish or any life anymore. And I have to give a hat tip to the staff at the Holiday Inn Erie where we stayed. They were really nice and enthusiastic. They were all wearing their Erie Eclipse shirts, and they put up a lot of decorations and had a cake and snacks for people who were watching the eclipse. When we woke up that morning, we thought we were going to be out of luck because it was completely cloud over. It was even raining. But we did see on the weather map there was a cell of clear weather over the Great Lakes sort of moving towards us, and thought we might get lucky. Around 2 p.m., right as the eclipse began, we began to get holes in the clouds. And when a totality hit, we still had a little bit of thin cloud cover, but it was thin enough that we could really see what was going on and had a very good view of the eclipse. As the eclipse approached, people started wandering into the parking lot, holding up their eclipse glasses. Someone set up a telescope with a big filter on it to block out the sunlight. As it got closer, more and more people came out. The shadows began to get a little bit peculiar the way they do right before an eclipse, because normally the sun has a certain size on the sky, so the rays create a very gentle shadow when it casts a shadow from your body or from anything else. As you get closer and closer, you get a narrower and narrower slice of the sun. Those rays become more parallel, so the shadows get sharper, and you get this sort of weird twilight feeling. Even though I had seen one before, it kind of amazed me how things change when that last sliver of sunlight disappeared behind the moon. That it just suddenly got really dark. You had around the horizon, it was like a sunset feeling. You could hear everyone, that we were about 50 to 100 people in the Holiday Inn parking lot. Everyone gasped and cheered when it happened.
Oh!
Oh, you can't see a little bit of the corona. Look at that glow around it, Ben. Look at that. Look at the sun.
Ben!
How do you take a photo?
Look at the glow around it. Even before it happened, you could hear cheering approaching from other parts of Erie as the shadow moved across the city. And then for 3.5 minutes, we were in totality. I didn't see the corona like I did last time when I was in Georgia and I had completely clear skies, but I could see the sun very clearly. I could even see a prominence on the southern part of the sun that has shown up in a lot of photographs. I was able to see that with my naked eye, which was really impressive. And it was just amazing. I was told by one of the weather experts that because the temperature drops as you get close to the eclipse, that has a tendency to break up clouds and provide a little bit of a clearer view than you would get otherwise. And I don't know if that actually happened. I'm not a weather expert, but it did seem like we got a really good view. And as I said last time, in my previous video, I said that totality is magical. And even having seen it before, even having told you guys how magical it was before, I was amazed by it. It still is stunning. My kids loved it. My wife loved it. The other astronomers who were there loved it. I talked to a few people in the crowd, just random strangers. They loved it. Some people were talking about maybe going to Iceland in 2026 for the next one. My wife is Australian, so we're now talking seriously about going to visit her family in 2028. for the eclipse there that will pass through Sydney. The next one that passes through Sydney will be 800 years from now. But it was quite an experience, and I hope that some of you got to experience it, even if you didn't get to totality, that you got to see at least a partial eclipse, because it is really amazing that this happens and that humans have the ability to predict this to such precision. And even before we had computers or spaceships or satellites or anything like that, ancient astronomers with nothing more than stone tablets and brains were able to predict these things pretty accurately. And it's a testament not just to the wonders of the universe, but to the wonders of the human mind, that we can predict this and see this and know it, and millions of people get to experience something that only a small fraction of humanity ever gets to experience. So I hope, if you didn't get to experience it this time, I hope in the future you will get to experience one. And hopefully you guys that are in the United States will live long enough with the one in 2045 that will pass through the center of the United States. Now, if you were one of the unlucky ones who got cloud cover or didn't get to see it, don't feel too bad. That happens. It's part of astronomy, that you are subject to the weather, that you are subject to clouds. And in that vein, I'd like to regale you with the tale I've told on a previous video, but I'm going to go into it in depth here. The most unlucky astronomer in history, who was Guillaume Le Gentil. This is a French astronomer who had discovered several nebulae, a number of things that we now call Messier objects, some of the most beautiful objects in the sky. Well, in the mid-18th century, there was this great effort to measure the transit of Venus. Venus is between us and the sun, but it only passes in front of it so that we can see occasionally. What you get is a pair of transits separated by 8 years, then a gap of 121 years, then another pair of transits every 8 years, then a gap of 105 years, and then the cycle repeats every 243 years. The reason for that is because there is a little bit of a synchronicity between the orbits of Earth and the orbit of Venus, so that it's rare that you get that passage that's so close that it can pass over the narrow disk of the sun. Now, in the mid-18th century, there was a great effort to measure this, because Kepler had shown the relative distances to the planets. He could show that the ratio of the distance between Earth and Jupiter and Saturn, that you could calculate all of these. But it was just a ratio. He didn't have it in absolute terms like meters or kilometers or anything like that. Well, it was Edmund Halley who realized, hey, we could use the transits of objects like Mercury and Venus over the sun to measure the distance to the sun by parallax, to basically triangulate the sun. If we measure it, the timing of it from different points on the Earth's surface, we could get that triangulation to measure the distance to the sun. And so he wasn't going to be alive in 1761, but his effort went on. And so in 1761 and then again in 1769, astronomers scattered all over the globe to try to measure the timing of the transit of Venus in various places. Because we knew the size of the Earth. You could measure that. We knew it was round. You could measure it using Eratosthenes' method. By that point, we had even more accurate measurements. So you knew where things were relative on the Earth, and then you could use that to triangulate the distance to the sun. And so Le Gentil decided to go to India, to Pondicherry, where the French had a holding, and make the measurement from there. Well, it took years to get there. There was wars going on, there was piracy, there were storms, and the 1761 transit occurred while he was still at sea. But no matter, he decided to go on. Well, because there was one in 1769. Well, he gets to Pondicherry, and the British had taken it in a war. So he diverts. And eventually was planning to go to the Philippines, but the Spanish government was very hostile to him. And by that point, the French and British had signed a treaty which returned Pondicherry to the French. So he reversed course and went back to Pondicherry. He gets there, and the locals and the French government are very amenable to him building an observatory there. So he builds an observatory. He's ready for the transit in 1769. The day of the transit dawns. It's clear as a bell outside. But right as the transit is about to happen, a huge cloud comes over the observatory and then disappears as the transit is finished. And Le Gentil was pretty philosophical about it. He said, well, that's the weather. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. Gets back on the boat, heads back to France. Still took a couple of years to get there. By the time he gets back, 11 years has passed. Now, you remember at the end of The Hobbit when Bilbo comes back and he's been declared dead and his relatives are looting his house? That's basically what happened to Le Gentil. None of his letters had gotten home. None of his reports had gotten home. They had decided that he was dead. His wife had remarried. His relatives had plundered his estate. And it took years of litigation and eventually intervention from the King of France to finally settle this on his behalf. Now, it did end up okay. He remarried, he had a good life, and he's now remembered, ironically, more for missing the transit than he would have if he'd seen it. There's been an opera about him. There's an asteroid named after him. There's a crater on the moon named after him. There's a street in Paris named after him, I think. And so he's very famous. I think he'd rather have seen the transit, to tell you the truth. I actually do have some little experience of that. I missed the 2004 one, but in 2012 I was here in Pennsylvania and we had an event out in Bellefonte to see the transit of Venus. And it was cloudy. We weren't seeing anything. Finally, we said, all right, let's go home. And we're driving home, and as we passed Walmart, we saw the sun come out. And we pulled over, put on our glasses, and sure enough, you could see Venus just completing its transit around the sun. And it wasn't quite as magical as an eclipse, but it was still an amazing sight, because that really, seeing that tiny little dot in front of the massive sun really is the first time and only time in my life I've really gotten that sense of the scale of the solar system, of just how big our universe is. That it was like I was looking down on the solar system and could see just the tremendous size of it. And it was really humbling and amazing. And I consider myself to be extremely fortunate that I've managed to see 2 total solar eclipses and the transit of Venus in my lifetime. The next one isn't till 2117. I'm hoping to live a long life, but I do not think I will still be around in 2117. Hopefully some of you will be and be able to see it. But if you do get a chance in 2117, 100 years from now, to see the transit, I do recommend it because it is a magical experience. We do get more frequent transits of Mercury. They're a little more difficult to see though, because Mercury is much smaller, it's much closer to the sun. But that is something that can be seen occasionally. So if you did end up being clouded out and missing it, just remember it could be worse. And unlike Guillaume Le Gentil, you get to look at pictures that people took in other parts of the world and that NASA took and that are all over the internet. So at least you can experience it vicariously, even if you couldn't experience it in person. That's it for my commentary on the eclipse. I did, however, want to discuss one thing. Some of you have asked me about my novel. There is a novel that I wrote about 8 years ago called The Water Lily Pond that I put on Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. And it's been there for 8 years. Sold a fair number of copies, and I've gotten good reviews on it. When I wrote this novel, it didn't occur to me that it would have any commercial potential or anything like that. I wrote it mostly for my own satisfaction, and then put it on Kindle without much announcement, and mainly for friends and family to read. But I have gotten a lot of positive feedback on it. So last year, I sent it to a professional editor, and he gave me some comments on it. First of all, just overall view of whether the book was marketable, and also like a lot of commentary about ways that the book can be improved. And over the last few months, I've been implementing those. I've been slowly editing the book, cutting down a lot of the fat, streamlining a lot of stuff. There's no major changes from the version that is on Amazon right now, but I think that the overall result is going to be a much better, leaner, more readable book. The plan right now is that I will transfer that from the Kindle ebook that exists right now to a print-on-demand book, so that you can order that book, you can hold a physical thing in your hand, because even as a very technically savvy person, I like to hold a book in my hand. And so the goal for this is that I will release this for publication in July, specifically July 7th, which was the birthday of my late sister, who really liked the book and really encouraged me to publish it. I will have more updates as we get closer. And in June, I will do a series of videos talking about aspects of the book and so forth. So there's no harm in downloading it now if you really want to read it. As I said, there's not going to be any major changes to it, just a few things trimmed out, a few things cleaned up. But I do think it will be a better book. And so hopefully we can build up to something so that when it's released, y'all can buy it and enjoy it. And it was with somewhat regret that I eventually published it, because it's a very different book from the kind of stuff I usually write. I don't think I'll ever write anything quite like it again. It's really more of an artsy science fiction or a literary science fiction, which is kind of unusual for me. I usually tend to write more in the technical science fiction sort of thing. I might actually start linking a few of my stories that I've written for my own website into the comment sections. But I will keep you updated on that as we get closer to publication, but keep that in mind that I will be having this come out. And but this is a way that you, if you want to support the channel, you can. And I think read a book that some people have told me is quite good. Being so close to it, I really can't judge. But that's the announcement, and I hope that you will support that. And if you do read the book, that you will enjoy it and tell other people about it. My next video, I'm going to plan to watch, to Alien Fest with watching the 3-body problem. That's going to be a live reaction while I will watch it cold with the video recording where I haven't seen it before and don't know much about it. So you'll get a more spontaneous response out of me, and then I'll have some more thoughts at the end of the video. So I'm thinking that will start hopefully next week, depending on how my schedule works out. We just had some things clear up at work that were occupying most of my time. And that will go for a few weeks while we go through the episodes. So hopefully that will start next week. But until then, I'm Mike Siegel. I write for Ordinary Times. Thank you for watching.